Chapter 10 of the Mortification of Sin. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Stephen Escalera. The Mortification of Sin by John Owen. Chapter 10. The second particular direction. Get a clear sense of 1. The guilt of the sin perplexing, considerations for help therein proposed. 2. The danger manifold. 1. Hardening. 2. Temporal correction. 3. Loss of peace and strength. 4. Eternal destruction. Rules for the management of this consideration. 3. The evil of it. 1. In grieving the Spirit. 2. Wounding the new creature. 3. Taking away a man's usefulness. The second direction is this: get a clear and abiding sense upon thy mind and conscience of the guilt, danger, and evil of that sin wherewith thou art perplexed. 1. Of the guilt of it. It is one of the deceits of a prevailing lust to extenuate its own guilt. Is it not a little one? When I go and bow myself in the house of Ramon, God be merciful to me in this thing. Though this be bad, yet it is not so bad as such and such an evil. Others of the people of God have had such a frame. Yea, what dreadful actual sins have some of them fallen into? Innumerable ways there are whereby sin diverts the mind from a right and due apprehension of its guilt. Its noisome exhalations darken the mind that it cannot make a right judgment of things. Perplexing reasonings, extenuating promises, tumultuating desires, treacherous purposes of relinquishment, hopes of mercy, all have their share in disturbing the mind in its consideration of the guilt of a prevailing lust. The prophet tells us that lust will do thus wholly when it comes to the height, Hosea 4:11. Whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. The heart, that is, the understanding, as it is often used in the Scripture. And as they accomplish this work to the height in unregenerate persons, so in part in regenerate also. Solomon tells you of him who was enticed by the lewd woman, that he was among the simple ones. He was a young man void of understanding. Proverbs 7:7. And wherein did his folly appear? Why, says he in the 23rd verse, he knew not that it was for his life. He considered not the guilt of the evil that he was involved in. And the Lord, rendering a reason why his dealings with Ephraim took no better effect, gives this account: Ephraim is like a silly dove without heart. Hosea 7:11. Had no understanding of his own miserable condition. Had it been possible that David should have lain so long in the guilt of that abominable sin, but that he had innumerable corrupt reasonings, hindering him from taking a clear view of its ugliness and guilt in the glass of the law? This made the prophet that was sent for his awaking, in his dealings with him, to shut up all subterfuges and pretenses by his parable, so that he might fall fully under a sense of the guilt of it. This is the proper issue of lust in the heart. It darkens the mind that it shall not judge aright of its guilt, and many other ways it hath for its own extenuation that I shall not now insist on. Let this, then, be the first care of him that would mortify sin, to fix a right judgment of its guilt in his mind. To which end take these considerations to thy assistance. 1. Though the power of sin be weakened by inherent grace in them that have it, that sin shall not have dominion over them as it hath over others, yet the guilt of sin that doth yet abide and remain is aggravated and heightened by it. Romans 6:1-2. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? How shall we that are dead? The emphasis is on the word we. How shall we do it, who, as he afterward describes it, have received grace from Christ to the contrary? We doubtless are more evil than any if we do it. I shall not insist on the special aggravations of the sins of such persons, how they sin against more love, mercy, grace, assistance, relief, means, and deliverances than others. But let this consideration abide in thy mind. There is inconceivably more evil and guilt in the evil of thy heart that doth remain, than there would be in so much sin if thou hadst no grace at all. Observe. 2. That as God sees abundance of beauty and excellency in the desires of the heart of his servants, more than in any the most glorious works of other men, yea, more than in most of their own outward performances, which have a greater mixture of sin than the desires and pantings of grace in the heart have, so God sees a great deal of evil in the working of lust in their hearts, yea, and more than in the open notorious acts of wicked men, or in many outward sins whereinto the saints may fall, seeing against them there is more opposition made, and more humiliation generally follows them. Thus Christ, dealing with his decaying children, goes to the root with them, lays aside their profession. Rev. 3:15. I know thee. Thou art quite another thing than thou professest, and this makes thee abominable. So then, let these things and the like considerations lead thee to a clear sense of the guilt of thy indwelling lust, that there may be no room in thy heart for extenuating or excusing thoughts, whereby sin insensibly will get strength and prevail. 2. Consider the danger of it, which is manifold. 1. Of being hardened by its deceitfulness. This the apostle sorely charges on the Hebrews 3:12-13. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief, in departing from the living God, but exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Take heed, saith he, use all means, consider your temptations, watch diligently. There is a treachery, a deceit in sin, that tends to the hardening of your hearts from the fear of God. The hardening here mentioned is to the utmost, utter obduration. Sin tends to it, and every distemper and lust will make at least some progress towards it. Thou that wast tender, and didst use to melt under the word, under afflictions wilt grow as some have profanely spoken, sermon-proof and sickness-proof. Thou that didst tremble at the presence of God, thoughts of death and appearance before him, when thou hadst more assurance of his love than thou hast, shalt have a stoutness upon thy spirit not to be moved by these things. Thy soul and thy sin shall be spoken of and spoken to, and thou shalt not be at all concerned, but shall be able to pass over duties, praying, hearing, reading, and thy heart not in the least affected. Sin will grow a light thing to thee. Thou wilt pass it by as a thing of naught. This it will grow to. And what will be the end of such a condition? Can a sadder thing befall thee? Is it not enough to make any heart to tremble, to think of being brought into that estate wherein he should have slight thoughts of sin? Slight thoughts of grace, of mercy, of the blood of Christ, of the law, heaven, and hell come all in at the same season. Take heed, this is what thy lust is working towards, the hardening of the heart, searing of the conscience, blinding of the mind, stupefying of the affections, and deceiving of the whole soul. 2. The danger of some great temporal correction, which the Scripture calls vengeance, judgment, and punishment. Psalm 89, 30-33. Though God should not utterly cast thee off for this abomination that lies in thy heart, yet he will visit thee with the rod. Though he pardon and forgive, he will take vengeance of thy inventions. Remember David and all his troubles. Look on him flying into the wilderness, and consider the hand of God upon him. Is it nothing to thee that God should kill thy child in anger, ruin thy estate in anger, break thy bones in anger, suffer thee to be a scandal and reproach in anger, kill thee, destroy thee, make thee lie down in darkness in anger? Is it nothing that he should punish, ruin, and undo others for thy sake? Let me not be mistaken. I do not mean that God doth send all these things always on his in anger. God forbid. But this I say, that when he doth so deal with thee, and thy conscience bears witness with him what thy provocations have been, thou wilt find his dealings full of bitterness to